Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Behind the Smile. Today is a very special episode because we have a returning guest to the show. Some of you may recognize this familiar face. This is my dad, Rod Butterss. Hey, Dad, how are you?
Yeah, great. Good to be here again.
I'm actually so looking forward to recording this episode today because you've been on the podcast twice before.
Yes.
But it hasn't actually been for quite some time. We had a little hiatus on the show and then I came back this year, but this is the first time that you've come back in this new version of the show. So
Yeah, be 18 months, I think.
yeah, I reckon it would be about that as well.
Yeah.
And one of the things that always happens with Dad and I is we have these awesome conversations and I always think to myself, God damn it, we should be recording this because I always feel like they're conversations that are around really broad topics that could be really helpful to a lot of people.
And I recall one of the things we enjoyed in your childhood was not every week, but occasionally having some really deep, in-depth conversations. One in particular, I won't embarrass you.
I know what you're going to say.
I won't embarrass you.
I feel like I know. I mean, there's probably plenty that
You know.
Yeah. It's really interesting.
It
isn't
involved contraception.
Oh, God. I mean, it is interesting, isn't it? You know, you often hear that little girls form really close relationships with their dads and
Yes.
same with boys and their mums. That
Yes.
was definitely what happened for us.
I think so.
And I think that our
Not to the
relations...
exclusion, but
Exactly
it
right.
was there.
Yeah, and it was something that just formed naturally.
I think so.
Yeah, it's interesting. And what I'm really grateful for is the fact that even though there has been periods throughout both of our lives where things have, you know, I mean, we've both experienced our own rock bottoms and
Yes.
there's been really painful experiences and traumas and the like, we have always had this really close bond and it's evolved over time as well.
Yeah, and we've had this ease of being able to have in-depth conversations and honest conversations without judgment, and you know, it really did come easily for both of us, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And even now being in adulthood, still having this close relationship with you. I mean, you came and had a sleepover the other
Yeah.
night, which was so nice and something that I don't take for granted because I know that that's not the case for everyone. And I'm, you know, I pinch myself on a daily basis that I have such a close relationship with you and Mum.
Yes,
And that's all thanks to my recovery because there was certainly a few years there where, you know, I mean, I moved to another state to get away from you guys.
yeah, and I think your recovery and the family's recovery.
Yeah.
You know, because you don't necessarily have to be in recovery if you're part of a family who are in recovery. The benefits will flow. They'll flow across because, as we say, it's attraction, not promotion. So we start behaving differently, and other members of our families, I think, recognise and appreciate that.
Yeah, without a doubt. It actually blows my mind as well to think about how much self-education there has been in our family. I was sharing my story recently at a meeting down in Geelong, and I was telling the part of my story where when I was about 18, 19 years old and I had put down alcohol but picked up cocaine. And
I recall.
Well, you certainly did because then you got the phone call.
Yes, I did.
When I had gotten to that point where I had sold my saxophone, my guitar, and I still owed an immense debt, and I had no other place to go or solution other than to call you.
Yeah, I remember.
And to ask for a bailout.
And you were honest.
Which, I was fucked. I mean, I didn't know where else to go.
Yeah, but you could have conjured up a story. You didn't.
Oh, and you know what? There were times where, like, my mind went into some pretty dark places of ways that I could make the money to pay that back. You know, it was just that desperation. I'm grateful that I had that safe space to land and to, you know, you in particular have never been judgmental around my falls and my failures. It's always been a place of support.
Yeah, well, I don't like judging anyone's flaws or failures because sometimes those failures are the making of genius. You know, I remember when I had, you know, different businesses, I liked hiring people that were a bit different and a bit odd and a bit NQR, and it often worked out.
Well, yeah, there's almost like that ability to, if you're open to failure, then you're open to growth.
Yes.
It's very, very unrealistic. You know, most successful people have had failures.
Yep, had their backside kicked.
But to go back to this point of self-education and something that I think our family has done really well is, you know, the solution at the time after I cleared the debt was to go to a health farm.
I recall.
And
I think I took you.
you took me there.
Yeah.
And that was all we knew at the time.
Yes.
We didn't understand that there were 12-step fellowships out there that have been around since the mid-30s.
I think I'd seen them in the movies.
Correct.
And I thought they were a Hollywood thing.
And like you said, you thought rehab was for rock stars, right?
Correct.
And so the fact that we've come, you know, 20 years later, you've been in recovery for 15 years. I just celebrated 5.
Yeah.
You know, that's huge.
It's massive. It's
Yeah.
massive. And it's not something we take for granted whatsoever. I often say when sharing from the floor that I feel so grateful that we were born in an era where these tools and support and community are available to us if are in effect free. You know, make a small contribution. But the support you get. And one of the things I've really enjoyed doing is taking friends who we describe as normies, i.e. they're not addicts or alcoholics. And I've taken half a dozen friends over the years into meetings for an experience. It's mind-blowing.
What do they experience when they step into one of those rooms?
What they experience firsthand is this sort of spiritual environment. You can feel the energy in an AA meeting, let's face it.
That's true.
And then they see people getting vulnerable and honest without being judged, in fact, being supported. And it's quite foreign to the way society operates. You know, we're going to talk about criticism later on, but it's so easy for people to lazily criticize when they don't quite understand. And so we get to have these experiences on a daily basis. Where we get a lot of support, and the miracle of recovery.
It is a miracle, isn't it? So, Dad, we're gonna keep to the format of the show,
Okay.
and that is that I've asked you to bring in a photo today
Yes,
from
you.
a time in your life where you were hiding behind a smile. So you were presenting one version of yourself to the outside world, but the reality was you were struggling on the inside. And you had a couple of different photos that you were tossing up between. So what one have you landed on?
I think the one I've landed on is the picture, and you were there when the club, very kindly I might add, awarded me life membership. The club being the football club of which I was president, the St Kilda Footy Club. And I found the picture of me, accepting the medal and making a speech. I was given 3 minutes. I went for 18.
I'm pretty sure you sent me like one of the raw versions before you got up there, and I was like, whoa, this is going to be a show.
Yeah, I mean, I love a microphone. And I used to say, give me a microphone. If I see a microphone, I go a bit weak at the knees. But a microphone and a camera, I'm gone. And I love public speaking. I just really, I get energy from the audience, an enormous amount of energy. Yeah, we share that in common.
Yeah.
But that particular picture is, addressing a crowd of a few hundred. And when the club first rang me and said, Rod, we're going to give you club membership, my immediate response was, no.
Where did that come from?
Well, when I was pres, my view was that you had to give 25 years service for a life membership. They're sacred. You know, they're not just handed out like paddle pops. And the president, Andrew Bassett, he said to me, well, mate, I'm not going to argue with you. If you want to argue with anybody, you argue with the chairman of the committee, who was a pretty tough cat, a fellow by the name of Ross Smith. And I rang Rossi, and he said, there will be no argument, Rod. And I said, graciously accepted, thank you.
Can I ask, was there any level of I'm not worthy of this?
Yeah.
And do you have any residual guilt over the way in which you left the club?
Not guilt. I've dealt with that.
Okay.
A bit of confusion. Because when you're in the public eye, people expect you to be, for some reason, perfect.
Yeah.
People are not perfect.
No.
People have flaws. People have shortcomings. People have challenges. And yet there's this naive perception that whether you're a politician or an AFL club president or an AFL player or a rock star, that you've got, I know rock stars get away with murder, you've got to be somehow perfect. And it's just unrealistic.
Well, what would you then say to the idea that people in the public figure are role models?
Well, they are. I mean, they are,
Mm.
but they're still human,
Yeah.
you know. So, yes, if you've made it to an elite level in any sphere, well, yes, you are a role model, and that comes with some responsibility. But I think also, and that's why I love this podcast, because we talk honestly and openly about the reality of life.
Mm.
You know, yes, I had a responsibility, but I was still bloody human.
And young.
And flawed. Well, yeah, I was young, 41 for God's
Oh
sake.
my goodness. The fact that it blows my mind, that that's sort of the age that I'm nearing now, and that's what your life looked like at that point.
And I had the EQ of a 10-year-old. I really did. I didn't know shit from clay. I was okay in a boardroom. I was okay with strategy. I was okay with people. But in terms of that broad emotional quotient where it's empathizing and understanding and curiosity and a people orientation, I was lacking.
So let's go back to the photo and specifically what was going on for you. So you mentioned, I mean, from what we can see, like you're presenting in front of a crowd, and a lot of people would think that you're great. Everything's good.
Oh,
This is a
for
highlight.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was going on internally?
Well, I was putting on a show. And so externally I was putting on a show, which I had to learn to do over many years in business and many years involved in elite sport. So, there are times when you're playing a part. You're an actor. And I don't think that's inauthentic. Your behaviour at a barbecue compared to your behaviour at an AFL president's lunch would be slightly different. So you tailor it according to. But, so there I was in my suit and, gobbling up the energy. But, as you know, I was having some serious troubles in my relationship that led to a bust. No criticism of my ex-partner whatsoever. She didn't pick up the drink, I did,
Mm-hmm.
But so I was grappling with that, that my brand, if you like, was, wow, this guy's transformed his life. But there was a little cancer eating away.
Yeah.
And that was, but what I've learned, there is absolutely no point beating yourself up. None. Just get honest with someone you can trust and commit to a program that works, whatever works for you. And it's okay to be human. We are perfectly imperfect. And that's how it is. And so I think if we don't have that humility, then it's a steep climb.
Can we talk a little more about the relapse for you? Because I think, firstly, so for those people who aren't part of a 12-step fellowship and they're not sure what happens, there's some meetings where if you're in your first 90 days, they ask you to stand up and identify and to share your day count.
Yes.
And there's a particular meeting that happens here in Melbourne on a Sunday morning, and there's in excess of 100 people each week. And I always am in full reverence of people who, particularly those who have got some serious time up, like,
yes.
a decade or more, who have a bust and they come back and they stand up and they identify.
Yes.
And I saw you do that, and Dad,
Yeah.
it shook me to my core.
Oh.
But not in a bad way. I was just like filled with, I was hurting for you, but I was also so proud of you.
Wow.
Because like that takes serious courage.
Yeah.
And humility.
Yeah, no, it does. And
what did that feel like?
there's no doubt it's embarrassing. There's no doubt there's an element of shame. But one of our mutual friends who busted, the lady I'm talking about, I won't name her because,
Of course.
but she stood up a week earlier
Mm.
and she gave, I will be forever grateful for the courage that she showed. She became my role model.
Wow.
And I went, righto, your turn.
Wow. And isn't that beautiful that somebody with 7 more days of sobriety
Yes.
than you can be
Yes.
your role model?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I've known this particular lady for 15 years. We've done a lot of recovery together. She's a dear friend and she's human.
Yeah.
And she had a stumble and she explained why. And I get it. And that's where, when we deal with this, the disease of addiction, whatever it might be, alcohol, sex, drugs, gambling, road rage, gossip, whatever your addiction, shopping, whatever it might be, it's insidious. And my last bust caught me by complete surprise.
Do you mind sharing what the the pretext was?
I'll do my best. It's a tricky subject because it involves sex.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so and I don't want to make that sound dramatic, but I have a theory.
Okay.
My father was a saint of a human being. You obviously knew Dad.
I did know my grandpa, yes.
He rescued my mother, and she was a naughty girl. I adore her to bits. She was intelligent. She was a writer,
Creative, smart,
a
spunky.
wonderful storyteller, drop dead gorgeous. But Mum, love you to bits, but you were a naughty girl. And she was the daughter of an alcoholic, an entrepreneur, and a morphine addict. And so I've had a habit. I'll put in one little qualification to anyone I've ever dated, just to qualify. I'm not branding you. Okay? Because, I'm not. But I tended to be attracted to naughty girls.
Right.
And it's only more recently when I've really got involved in Gabor Mate's material, where he says that, in his view, and I respect him enormously, but in his view that most, if not all, addictions stem from trauma. And I can get that. That makes sense to me.
So if you trace it back, where did that begin?
Probably in the womb. Because Dad rode in on his white horse and rescued the wounded woman, my mother, Yvonne, beautiful soul, and proceeded to give her 10 children. And now you tell me that in the 50s and 60s, when you've got one child out of wedlock and you're churning out another one every 12 or 15 months, that you are not, and Mum was an anxious person who suffered depression. So according to Gabor, not Rod, according to Gabor, that stuff gets felt in the womb. That's where it begins. And the interesting point about that is that when you're in the womb or in your first 12 months, you can't articulate that. You can't express that. You can't rationalise that. It's just, yuck. Now, as we get older, we get better at communicating that. But one of the criticisms I've had from intimate partners is that I am a love avoider. So let me put that into context.
Please.
I was one of 10 kids.
Number 6.
Number 6 of 10. It was a shit fight, You imagine 10 kids running around the house and...
I can't.
Yeah, I know. It was chaos. It was organised chaos.
It was one bathroom as well, right?
One bathroom, one dunny, one television.
Wow.
And the dunny was inside the bathroom. So
it's 12 people trying to use one toilet.
Exactly. So my strategy to cope with that was to get the hell out of there. And I remember at age 6 and 7, I would get up, have my breakfast and go. I'd go to the golf club and collect golf balls and sell them. I'd go to the football and watch my Tigers I barracked for. I'd just get away. And I'd come back 12 hours later, and it was okay. So my strategy for dealing with trauma, if you like, or overwhelming scenarios is to nick off. And now I'm 66 and I see the relationship between the 3-year-old or the 5-year-old nicking off, running away to get away from the chaos, and the 66-year-old who, when, as all relationships do, there are times when you have to have difficult conversations, hopefully not judgmental, but difficult conversations where you're owning your bit, but you're trying to express your needs, etc., like that. Well, historically, I've been a bolter, and I'm trying to change that because it wasn't very successful.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because there's sort of two parts to that. There's firstly who you're attracted to. Is that, my own experience has been, and I'm a lot younger, so I'm not saying that I necessarily have this figured out, but my own experience has been is that when I did the work to identify the patterns,
Yep.
and I actually went against my thinking, and I've shared this openly on the podcast before. When I was dating my fiance in the beginning, I was speaking to my sponsor like, I just don't think this is going to work, because it felt so foreign.
Yes.
To be with someone so safe and consistent and have,
Exactly.
and a nervous system that felt regulated. It felt boring to me, to be perfectly honest.
Exactly, I get it.
But by that stage, I had a really strong and honest relationship with a woman who I would call and I would share my stuff, and she really helped me start to take contrary action in that area.
And she had an enormous amount of life experience.
Correct, and she had a healthy relationship that I I could see that she had what I wanted in that area of her life, and so I was able to do. I was then able to, I guess, attract someone into my life who had the right qualities and who was the right fit for me. But then the second part to that is having the acceptance that relationships come with challenges, difficulties, compromises, and learning how to navigate those. I guess my question for you would be, where are you at? Like, do you think that you are still in the part where you're working out what the right, who the right person is from a characteristic standpoint and all that kind of stuff? Like, do you have to figure that out before you can work through? Because the last thing you want to do, I guess the point I'm trying to get at is, the last thing that you want to do is attract in a partner who's not right for you and then spend the next 5 years trying to make it work.
Correct.
That, like...
Yeah, rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. So I've thought about it a lot. Where I'm at the moment is I'm pausing. And I'm doing some other fellowships which help in terms of understanding what intimacy really is, what love really is, what healthy relationships really are. And I'm learning an enormous amount. And I'm so grateful for that. However, I'm still I only separated from Chris 6 months ago, and there's part of me that just wants space, a lot of space, and I'm happy to be in that space, and I'm filling that space up with nourishing stuff like Gabor Mate, Dr. David Hawkins, Sir Kenneth Robinson, Russ Harris, my favourites, and I think that if it's meant to be, it'll happen. But equally, I'm passionate about writing. I love writing. And if that's where my relationship ends up, with me and a pen, so be it.
In your treehouse.
In my treehouse.
Yeah.
I told you about my treehouse.
You have told me about your treehouse.
Yeah, I want to build a treehouse.
I know you will. I've always said I'm your number one fan, and I just think that you can do anything you set your mind to. So the question I then have is, how do you grapple with and sit in the loneliness? Because I have a friend at the moment who recently went through a breakup, rebounded quickly. That's now ended. And she said to me, she's like, Ash, I need to be alone and I don't know how. And I can already see her, she's trying really hard, but there's part of her brain that is just so, she said, she articulated it beautifully. She's like, I can't sit with myself.
Yeah.
I can't be with myself. It's the most uncomfortable thing in the world.
And I've had friends share that.
Yeah.
And all I can say to that is I am blessed to thoroughly enjoy my own company.
Okay, so that's not something that you grapple with.
Oh, not whatsoever. You give me a pen and a bit of paper and I'm a happy camper. All right, I'll just write poetry, or I've got a nice network of friends, and, we'll have a coffee and go for a walk and yada, yada. But do I need that sort of, connected romantic relationship in my life to feel whole? No, I don't.
Yeah, that's great. And I guess that's a reflection then on the work that you've done on yourself to have that. For me, it was something that I only learned how to do in recovery. Now I love people ask me to go somewhere and I'm like, really? I just be alone on the couch.
But what's interesting is that, remember we were talking about childhood.
Yes.
And my strategy for coping was to nick off.
Yeah.
And you could argue that there's an element of me nicking off now because I'm not searching for another relationship.
But I think that's a good thing, because I think that if you continue to do the same thing, you're going to get the same result.
100%.
And you've got to have that time and space to heal, to grow, and
To learn.
then and to raise your frequency so that the next energetic vibration that comes into your sphere is in alignment with the person you want to be.
You're talking about my hero, Dr. David Hawkins. And if you haven't checked it out, guys, his chart of consciousness is beautiful.
Tell me about that.
Well, he didn't design the chart of consciousness, but it starts out at what he calls a low vibration, sort of apathy, shame, fear, guilt. Now, none of us want to feel apathetic, shameful, fearful, or guilty. I mean, that's horrible. But he used a technique, kinesiology, actually, over a 20-odd-year period. He was a psychiatrist and a medical lecturer. So he was lecturing up to 300 students a week, and he used those 300 students over a 20-year period to validate this testing. And so I think apathy is about 30, shame's about 50, but anything under a 200 vibration is unhealthy.
So there's like a scale.
Yeah.
Okay.
A chart. So he's very much of the view, and I get it. What you put out, you get back. I think it was Einstein that said everything is energy, and that's all there is to it. If you focus on the energy that you're putting out, that's what you'll get back. And he said, that's not philosophy, by the way. That's pure physics. And like we all, we've had those moments of joy or satisfaction or courage or love or whatever, and we feel better for it. So that's something I try and focus on. And being of service is a really nice way to do that. Going to an AA meeting vibrates at 350.
Wow.
Which is way above 200, which is the sort of the cusp. Being of service is really important because you get a little thing called self-esteem, and that feels pretty good. And, of course, enlightenment vibrates at 1,000. That's a long way off.
Yeah, right. Okay. Keep going.
But I'm aspirational.
Yeah, that's right. Wow, that's fascinating. Yeah, I do believe that to be so true. What you put out, you get back.
Well, let me give you an example, and I know people listening will get this absolutely. You walk into a room and you meet someone, and something in your tummy goes, ugh, hang on, NQR.
Mm-hmm.
That is your intelligent intuition picking up on the energy. Mm-hmm. And I think if we can all just learn to appreciate, understand, and accept that. We have a brain, sure, but we've got intuition.
Yeah, 1,000%.
And we have heartfelt guidance.
Yeah.
So I think it's Gay Bohr that says most of Western medicine is from the shoulders above. Mm-hmm. So you go to the doctor, I'm feeling depressed, here's a tablet. And I'm probably going to be on those tablets for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. Whereas Gay Bohr says, well, hang on, why are you depressed? What happened in your life? What happened in your mother's womb? Was she fearful? Was she anxious? Was she, scared? What were her traumas that she brought into her? Now, my mother was a war baby. My father went and fought in a war. And I have a lot of Jewish friends. And I talk to they're wonderful human beings because they allow me to talk to them about the Holocaust. Their parents were victims of the Holocaust. I mean, come on. Yeah. This is heavy shit. Yeah. And I think because society in my time was about toughen up, son. We don't talk about that stuff. That's for girls.
Men don't cry.
Men don't cry. Well, you better learn. I had another situation when my brother Jerry passed away about 2.5 years ago, and I was asked to do the eulogy, and I couldn't grieve. I could not grieve. And I'm standing there thinking, what the hell's the matter with you? Why can't you grieve your beautiful brother? He was a beautiful human being. And then it dawned on me. When I was 7, my little sister Mary passed away. And the fucking pain was palpable. And watching Mum go into a deep depression was palpable. And the 7-year-old said, never, ever again. Never am I going to grieve again. It's too painful. And because Dad was a stoic, he wasn't a natural nurturer. He wasn't a natural communicator. He was a man of action. You know, he was a man of doing great things for the community. The 7-year-old didn't get nurtured. And so I had to navigate my way through this grief without the articulation skills, without the verbal capability, with a mother who was in the fetal position in the corner, and my other 7 or 8 brothers and sisters just coping. And when you look back on it, you sort of go, gee, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. You know, because I remember, and you were there at Jerry's funeral, pardon me, giving the eulogy, thinking, Rod, it's like you're giving a president's speech.
You almost just go into
survival mode.
Yeah, a mode, a character, get the job done.
Yeah.
Switch off that part of the brain. It's almost like a coping strategy, isn't it?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally a coping strategy. And it was one that made me sort of go, hang on, pause. You need to have a look at that.
And so have you?
Oh, shit, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Do you think that you've grieved Jerry?
Yes. Okay. I have grieved his passing in a more evolved way than since the passing, than during and at the passing. Through curiosity around, you know, the like we've talked about, Gabor Mate and others, through that knowledge and information that you get, you know, and thank God I'm curious. It's just a natural sort of thing. I'm forever looking under.
That's probably why you love being a grandpa so much.
Yeah, yeah.
It's that playful, childlike.
Yeah. Well, I wrote a poem recently about, you know, the adult's relationship with your inner child. And, you know, I remember being on a ski lift and I don't sound like a bloody wanker, but...
but you're going to.
Yeah. Well, I was in Aspen, yeah. And I was on a ski lift and with a very high profile, a very, very successful businessman. And we're halfway up and he made a comment, I can't remember what it was. And I said to him, doesn't your inner child come out to play? He said, what do you mean? And I explained it. He started to cry. He started to cry. He had this adult presentation, but he'd completely forgotten about that beautiful inner child who had creativity, imagination, courage, exploration, you know, fall over, get back up, try things, climb a tree. You know, I remember your brother, my son Cam, was climbing a tree when he was about 3 and his mother raced outside and said, stop climbing that tree, you'll hurt yourself. And I said, that's the whole idea. You know, we have to learn.
Yeah. Well,
you know?
Hasn't that changed? You know,
yeah.
There's just this, there seems to be a bubble wrap around society in many ways now.
It does.
Yeah.
And we have to learn to fall over.
And fail.
And fail.
Yeah.
And get our bums kicked and
yeah.
think, shit, that hurt. And I'll start, you know, do what I have to do to go again. So, yeah.
So coming back to this theme of failure, you know, I would argue that if you had predicted where you'd be at 66 years of age, a lot of what is happening in your life right now and over the last 18 months would not have been on your bingo card.
Oh, no, indeed not.
And yet you continue to show up. And, you know, someone asked me the other day, how's your dad? And I just smiled and I said, my dad is the most resilient, positive person I know.
Well, I got that from my mother.
You've taken more knocks than most.
Mum programmed me.
Yeah.
She programmed me. I remember sitting on her knee. I remember at 4 and 5, and she'd said, "There's something about you. There's just something." She programmed me. I know that, and sometimes I find it confusing because I've blown a lot of money, like a big number, but I firmly believe that the universe has something in store. And I own the fact that I blew the money. No one else blew the money. I blew the money. So I have no resentments, you know.
Do you have any, you know, I was thinking about this the other day. It's a question that popped into my mind and I thought I'll save it for the podcast. Do you regret ever loaning the amount of money you loaned? Because like people probably don't realise that in the height of your success, you were lending people in excess of $1 million per person.
Yeah.
And that hasn't come back.
No.
You know, when you've been on your ass and really, really in need of help, none of that's come back.
Or very little.
Very little.
And the point was, am I resentful or
do you regret it?
Do I regret it? No, because I made that decision. Like,
what was the thought process at the time? Is it just, I believe you're just a very open, generous, kind, loving person, but was there a need for validation or love or?
No, I just think if you've got it, share it.
Yeah.
You know, and I had mates at the time that needed help, and it was naive. You know, if I had my time again, hopefully I will, when we get fungus up and running.
Yes.
You know, I'll be a bit more prudent, but I've never been one to live in regret, or I mean, learning's important, very important, but there's no point me beating myself up, none.
Do you think part of the reason you had such a carefree relationship with money was because it did come so easily?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
No, I bought my first company for 45 grand and sold it for 50 million 6 years later. My second company was a good idea, and was a good idea. It cost me nothing. We sold it for 80 million. The third company, 100 million. Yes, I was blessed. Yes, I was cocky. I was. I love people. I was in technology in the 80s and 90s. Well,
boom.
All you had to do was go to lunch.
I've spoken about this, eh?
I was in my element, you know, and then go to some other places which I won't mention. And yes, it came very, very, very easily. And I didn't even write a business plan. You know, I had a partner come in once who joined the business as we were maturing, and he said, "Can I have a look at your business plan?" And I said, "No, I haven't got one."
I'm surprised you didn't pull out a napkin and a pen.
Well,
Classic
basically,
Rod
yeah,
special.
yeah. If it can't fit on a napkin, it's already taking too long. And but it turned out that he got it. He got it. You know, because our strategy was so simple. You know what our strategy was?
Hire more people.
Hire more salespeople.
Right.
That's it.
Almost got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. And it worked. So I have a little saying in business: if it works, keep doing it.
Yeah.
If it doesn't, stop. You know, and it worked. And
simple.
Yeah, and I remember Cam, just my son, the other day saying that he came to and you were there too, but you're a bit younger, the auction when we bought that massive place down on the beach in Brighton, and he said, I think he said he was 9, which would have made you about 5 or 6.
Yeah, that's right.
And he said, "Dad, I remember you writing out the check," and he mentioned the amount.
Yeah, the deposit.
Yeah. And I was a bit silly because I hadn't sold the business yet. So
it's just insanity, right?
Well, yes, it was insanity and naivety. Yes, absolutely. On one hand, but on the other hand, I just had such belief, such belief in what we were doing.
And is that alive in you today when you look at Fungus, your new project?
Absolutely. Yeah, we can change the world. We can and will change the world.
Give me the elevator pitch, just a quick couple.
Yeah. Well, there was a fungus that first appeared in 1840. It was known as the Irish potato famine. It's a pathogen, and it has since spread across the globe, across crops, across forestry, across nurseries, across you name it, and there's no cure. And I'm part of a little group that have patented a cure, and the tests are mind-blowing. And we're having some pretty bold conversations right now. In fact, I rang our chairman the other day and I said, "Mate, I need you to ring the PM and get 100 million from him to take this to market." And I also told him this is the next $1 trillion business. And, you know, friends of mine, when I say things like that, they they look at me and like, "You can't say that." And I'm like, "Yeah, you can."
That's what I love about you, though.
But I believe it.
Yeah.
Because, 1 in 10 are starving. That's 700 million people are starving. 3 in 10 are malnourished. 860 million subsistence farmers are struggling. And we've got a product that can solve it. We can save habitat, wildlife, forestry. So why wouldn't I be cocky and say it's worth $1 trillion?
And so, for people to get a bit of an understanding around how long you've actually been working on this, it's not something that's happened overnight.
No.
And you're still very much in the process, I should say, of really building this company.
Yeah.
And there's been points where your ass has been absolutely handed to you in the last 18 months.
Yep.
And you've never given up. How?
Well, I just wouldn't know what to do to give up. What do you do? I don't know. What do you do?
Go work at Coles.
Oh, seriously? Oh,
Yeah.
no, I
You're just
don't.
always
I
going to
just
be an
wouldn't be very good.
entrepreneur.
I worked for a big company when I was about 22, and they didn't like me, and I didn't like them. They wrote memos, and I'm like, nah, I can't do this, you know. But then I got blessed because, you know, remember we went around Australia. Well, you don't remember because
No, but yeah, I mean, I've shared that story on the podcast, and
we took a year off and went around Australia, and I got back, and God blessed me by saying, a mate of mine said, "Do you want to buy half my company for 40 grand?" And I said, "Yes." And we sold it 5 years later for 60 million, 50 million.
where'd you get the 40 grand
I
from?
can't remember.
Wow.
Yeah, I can't remember. Actually, I was thinking about that the other day, and yeah, can't remember.
Yeah.
But it's like, you know, we're talking about the scale of consciousness. If you generate the right energy, and I don't want this to sound waffly at all, but if if you're positive and you believe in what you're doing and you attract good people, I can honestly say in most of my businesses, in most of my projects and at the footy club, I was the least experienced person in the room, and I made sure that I surrounded myself with seriously bright people. And you've met some of them, you know.
Absolutely.
And so I think I'm proudly a student for, you know, and curious, you know. And I remember the first day at the footy club, one of the directors, a dear friend, Glenn Casey, taught me about root cause analysis.
Oh, yes. This is one of your favourites.
Yes.
Shall we share it?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So going back to 200,000 years or whatever it was, when man left the cave with the spear, he didn't have a lot of time to consider the options. So because he was going to get eaten by the saber-toothed tiger or he was going to kill it, one of the two. So men in particular, but men and women, we tend to see a problem and go, solution. And what I learned from Glenn was to ask the question why 5 times before you go to the solution. And invariably you end up solving a different problem.
Right.
So take addiction. You know, our behaviour is unacceptable. Why? Well, because I drink too much. Why? Well, because I grew up in a culture that, you know, drank a lot. Is that the reason? Is that really the reason? You know, because there's lots of other people that grew up in that culture, so why do you think that? And if you follow Gabor's material, he'll say that it all started, you know, in the womb or in
Early childhood, yeah.
And then you can start to solve the real problem, not the wrong problem. And we can spend a lot of energy solving the wrong problem.
Yeah.
And then it bites us on the bum again. So I've always, and I remember the first day Glenn also shared with me some data and analytics, and I've come to love data. And he said, Rocket, if you show me the right data, the answer will slap you in the face. And I mean, how lucky. You know, I drove past a university once. I was never suited to them. But I've had these wonderful teachers.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
wonderful teachers.
School of life, right?
Yeah.
Unreal.
And lived experience.
Yeah.
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 But I think you know, it helps being curious. It really does, because you tend to ask yourself, well, hang on, let me just take a closer look at that, you know, rather than just accept what you read on the back of the pack or you read, you know, wherever.
So then if somebody's listening along today and, you know, they want to start a new life, a new chapter, you know, they want to step into recovery, they want to figure out their purpose, they want to change the world, whatever it is, maybe just live a nice, peaceful life that feels in alignment for them. Like, where should they start? What would your guidance be around that?
So I have a little model I use, and it looks like a set of stairs. So it starts on the left-hand side, and there's 8 or 9 steps, and then you get to the top of the steps, and that's your goal. Now, that goal can change and move anytime, but you've just got to work out, I am yet to take a single step. What is that step I want to take, and what do I need in order to take it? Simple as that. Because if my first step is to build a website, but I haven't got $1, it ain't going to get built, you know. Or if my first step is to assume that my typical customer is, and I make that a wrong assumption because I haven't done the 5 whys, then they're not going to buy my product or service. So I like the staircase model because it can move around according to the environment. If we got into recession or managing risk or whatever it might be. But and I can do it on one page. I can do it on one napkin.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I think it's really important to look at what is the next right step. What's right in front of you? What can you do today?
Yeah.
I talk about it being the 1%. What's the 1% shift that when I work with clients and I say, like, what's the one thing we're going to do today to navigate you in the direction that we're heading? Because
don't worry about tomorrow.
No, it's
too far away.
Correct. And often when we set ourselves up for this big lofty goal, it can be overwhelming. It can feel like it's too far away. I'm never going to get there. And also, I really encourage my clients to not hold on too tightly to what they think the goal is.
Absolutely.
Like my own experience,
No.
I had no idea 5 years ago that I'd be sitting here today having this conversation with you.
That's right.
That's all happened because I've just continued to take the next step that was in front of me.
Have a goal, but it's got to be like plasticine. You've got to be able to shape it.
Malleable.
It's got to be malleable because things change. And, sometimes it's good to be so focused and fixed on your goal. That's focus, great. But other times, particularly in the modern world, we have to pivot. They call it in the tech industry.
Yeah.
You've got to pivot and adapt. And but I think it helps to, I know a lot of people that cannot get their head around living in a smaller home for 2 or 3 years to invest some of the proceeds into a business opportunity that would change their life. It horrifies them. And I'm like, oh, okay, why would you accept that mediocrity? Why would you want to live in that fear?
Yeah. Well, I feel like there's probably a lot of ego tied in with that as well, right? What will people think if I downsize?
Yeah, I don't know. It's just beyond my comprehension, But I have a dear friend who, he and his wife don't get along that well, and they live in a nice enough home, and he'd love to start a business. I said, mate, because my ACE theory.
Yes.
Accept it, change it, or exit it. But don't just live in it. Yeah. And I said, mate, I went through ACE, and I said, you've been trying to change this for 20 years, and you're unhappy. He said, well, I'm not going to sell the house. No way. And I suppose I've just got to go, okay, that's you.
Yeah.
That's
everyone's got their choices, and they just have to be able to live with them.
Everyone's got their choice. Everyone's got their price.
Yeah.
What price are you prepared to pay for misery? Everyone on planet Earth has a price.
Yeah. It's similar to like everyone has a different bottom, right? Like when I look back at my bottom, I could have continued riding that train for another decade.
Of course.
And it just would have kept getting worse and worse. Yeah, well, if I hadn't have died before then. But, I just got to the point where I was like, no, I've had enough. This pain is enough. And for some people, that's greater.
Yeah.
They've got to lose a lot more.
Yeah.
Before they're willing to.
And I think also what I've noticed is that I've seen people allow an external situation that they could choose to change to become their identity, and they become welded to that's just who I am. And I'm like, really? See, I've learnt stop looking at things in terms of yes, no, right, wrong, good, bad. Stop it. And start looking at every situation like a diamond with a million facets. There are some brilliant facets. There are some not so great facets. And there are some flaws. And that's life, But if our mind is programmed right, wrong, good, bad, yes, no, then the risk is it's going to be narrow because we won't step into the ring and have a crack. We just won't.
Yeah.
Because this wiring is saying, no way, don't do it.
Yeah. Well, it's all fear, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And whatever else you allow your brain to tell you. I mean, it's a really good exercise that I've learnt in recovery to often, fairly often observe what your brain is telling you.
Yeah.
Actually picture it like you're sitting in a picture theatre and you're watching your brain on the stage. And it's like, oh, really? It just told me that. Oh, really?
Yeah.
And if we're not conscious, if we're unconscious, we can believe it.
Of course, because the voice is our voice and it lives inside our head and it's very convincing and it's very loud. Of course, we're going to believe that if we don't have tools that teach us how to pause and actually observe the thought rather than be the thought.
And that's why I love Russ Harris's work, because he explains, and and I don't think it's your favourite one of mine, but it's the light.
I don't mind the light.
The match.
Yeah.
The flame.
Yeah.
And where I say the flame is a representation of your brain. It can cook your food. It can warm your home. That very same flame can burn your house down.
I like that one.
It's and that is our brain.
Totally.
And then, you fold in Sir Kenneth Robinson, who is one of my just favourite authors as well, the British academic. He's passed now, but he says, our mission in life is to find our element, to find our passion. And I did this in early recovery, and I recommend to a lot of youngsters or people in early recovery to do it. And I recommend everyone do it, anyone listening do it. Sit down with a pen and a bit of paper and write down everything you've ever thought you'd love to do. And it'll probably start, with most men anyway, as I wanted to be a fireman, and for maybe a lady, a nurse, a school teacher, I don't know. But when I did that, I picked up a musical instrument and taught myself guitar. Now, I'm not much good at it, but that's not the point.
Yeah.
But what I did do, I started writing. And if you want to, if you want me to be in my element, if you want to find me in my element, it's sitting at the PC, or I prefer, handwriting, writing. Yeah. And some of the feedback about some of the more recent stuff I've written around trauma and seeking to be bold in a complex world, the feedback is really lovely.
Well, and it moves people as well. What happens to you when you're in your element?
Creativity and flow. Yeah, and a sense, an enormous sense of achievement. Creativity, flow, achievement. I remember thinking, oh yeah, this is actually pretty good.
And I imagine as well, I kind of think back to, for you and I, who used to find peace and contentment at the end of a bottle.
Yep.
You find it in your element.
Correct.
It's that same thing that we've been chasing and searching for in addiction.
It fills your cup.
100%. Yeah. When I'm in flow, it's just, I'm like, oh, this is what I was looking for.
Yeah. And so I'm a pretty undisciplined sort of cat. It's, I don't know, just the way it is. But, I'm not writing one book at the moment. I'm writing 5.
That's correct.
As well as the poetry. But, and here's an example. I started a book because I want anyone, I'm thinking, if people think they've got a problem with sex, with drugs, with gambling, with alcohol, with road rage, with antisocial behaviour, how do they identify that? Rather than having to end up in a jail cell, end up in a hospital, end up in a car crash, end up in a messy divorce. How do they identify that? So the working title of the book is Addiction Facing the Devil, but a friend of mine recently suggested we change that to a question. Because if people can I can see people standing in a bookshop thinking, wow, maybe I need to take a closer look at this. And as you and I both know, and we've heard the stories, addiction affects family members as much as it affects the addict. So they become as sick. So the book's targeting someone who's at a point of the crossroad where they're inquisitive as to, maybe I've got a problem.
Yeah.
Or the family members who are sitting there thinking, what the hell do we do?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it is such a confusing time. And I've had, people on the show before, Toby Lawrence, who owns a rehab, whose brother, was an addict, and just how much it can destroy families, and to be able to offer that additional resource of support, that tool as well, it's going to be brilliant.
Open it up. It's a bit of a secret. It's a bit of a we don't really talk about that.
Well, like you and I 20 years ago going to a health farm because we didn't know the resources that were available.
Correct. Yeah. Nor were we ready.
Yeah.
You got to be ready.
That's true.
you know, it was really interesting. I had a coffee yesterday afternoon with a good buddy of mine who's been relapsing, you know, badly, and he said, "I'm ready." And I said, "That's great. Are you desperate?"
Yeah.
And he said, "I'm desperate."
Yeah, good.
You know, so the community,
Yes.
you know, we're getting together and we're trying to figure out which is the best place for him, because he needs a detox and then he needs a proper 12-step. You know, so we'll do our best. But you know, it was like music to your ears. Are you ready? Yeah. Are you desperate? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, that's what you need. All right, Dad. Well, speaking of questions, I've got one final question for you. And this is a question that we ask all of our guests at the end of the show. And it's changed slightly since you were last here. So the question is, what are your 3 non-negotiables that allow you to live your life today happy, authentic, and free?
I think happy is step 10 and 11. Authentic is having a silent agreement with yourself about, you know, what's okay and what's not. And free, I feel free. I'm blessed, you know. 2 beautiful children, 2 beautiful grandchildren.
Don't forget Frank.
And Frankie, where's he going?
His fur baby's right at your feet. Oh, God. And Norman.
2 wonderful, daughter-in-law and son-in-law.
Yeah.
Put it that way. Yeah.
In-laws, I guess.
You know, great family, good friends. Yeah, I'm not. I don't feel shackled in any way.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Hey, Dad, thanks so much for coming back on the show. I've absolutely loved this conversation.
No worries.
We say here on Behind the Smile that when we recover loudly, no one needs suffer in silence. So thank you so much for being here today.
Absolute pleasure and love you.
Love you, Dad.
Thank you.